Hello, everybody. We are live at last. We are live for SassafrasCast episode 45. We are talking today about tarot-led shadow work. Let's get going.
Oh, there's magic coming. Oh, there's magic coming. Oh, there's magic coming. Where you gonna be tonight? Oh, there's magic coming. Oh, there's magic coming. Oh, there's magic coming. Get ready for the rest of your life.
Hello and welcome to SassafrasCast, a podcast full of witchy insights to help you lead your sassiest life. I am Rorie Kelly, a tarot reader, singer-songwriter, and all-around personal growth nerd from Long Island, New York. In just a moment, we will begin the witchy weather report, but first, a shout out to my patrons. If you did not know, you can support this podcast at patreon.com/Sassafras Tarot for $1 a month or more, whatever you can afford. I record these episodes live, and my patrons get a private YouTube link before each one so they can tune in for the live recording, hang out in the chat, ask questions, and get them answered in real time. I already see Melissa in the chat. Greetings, greetings. Patrons also get access to my Discord server where we talk about all things witchy and wonderful. And a shout out in every episode. Here we go. Are you ready? Okay. Shout out to Amanda Curry, Melissa Marie Imagery, Rachel Miller, Grayson, Millie Orozco, Ruby, Rebecca Jones, Brittany, Hannah Westlock, Jennifer McPhail, Ondine PM, singer of Vox Guitar for PM Edition, and Dee Ann Miller. I am so grateful that you are in my world, and I'm so grateful to have you here with me. Some of you are hanging out in the chat. Some of you will see this whenever you see it. That's the glory of being a patron. You get access to the live broadcast of SassafrasCast as well as other perks. I'm so glad you're here. We're talking about shadow work today, friends. If you are live, please drop a thing in the chat and just let me know if you're seeing and hearing me okay, because we've had an adventure. This is take 2 of this broadcast, where take 1 was stymied by a server issue, and I had to quick, fast, and in a hurry create a backup way to stream to y'all and make sure that I could get this recorded as well. And now here we are. So welcome to take 2 of SassafrasCast, episode number 45, in which we're talking about tarot-led shadow work. I'm really passionate. I'm passionate about shadow work, as you know. I am teaching a course called Shadow Work Summer School, and I will put the information for that in the show notes, or you can reach out to me on any of my social media if it's something you're interested in. But as always, I like to give you the keys to the kingdom in this podcast because I believe that self-work is something that we should be able to access and do ourselves. And I am someone who loves doing things like taking courses and growing in community and healing in community, and that's something that I'm offering to people as an experience this summer. But I want you to be able to do this work for yourself and with yourself, no matter what. So we're talking today about tarot-led shadow work. It's going to be a little different than other episodes because usually we have different sections. We have the topic, we have which you got this, and really this whole episode is going to be which you got this. I'm going to be taking you through practical ways to lead yourself in tarot-led shadow work right now that you can do honestly again and again and again. Shadow work is an iterative process. Any type of healing is an iterative process. And when I say iterative, what I mean is that we're never done. We keep peeling back more layers of the onion. We continue on the spiral growth path. There are a lot of different metaphors for that. We are always able to do more work and show up for ourselves more. So when I introduce you to tarot-led shadow work, what I like about it, for me, I'm a tarot reader, right? So anything I can do with tarot feels like coming home because I have been reading since I was a teenager. I am now turning 40 this summer. So that's, 25 plus years that I've been reading tarot. And for me, it's become a familiar, loving language of symbolism that I can come home to and get a lot of value out of. However, what I'm about to share with you doesn't require you to have a knowledge of the tarot necessarily. It just requires you to be able to show up for yourself. Let's start, however, with the Witchy Weather Report. I do these readings in the Witchy Weather Report with an intention that wherever and whenever they find you, whether you're watching live as a patron, whether you are coming to this a few days later, or whether you're seeing it or hearing it. I have a video and an audio version of every podcast. Whether you're seeing or hearing this like well after the fact, you know, whether it's like years down the line and you've just discovered SassafrasCast and you're binging, in which case, awesome. That's so cool. Thank you. I do these witchy weather reports with the intention that whenever they reach you, they have something right in that moment to offer you. I'm reading today with the Way Home Tarot, which really has become a very friendly tarot for me to turn to during this time. It's created by Bakara Wintner and Autumn Whitehurst, and it's an absolutely beautiful deck. So let's dive into the Witchy Weather Report today. I will share that at this moment in time, if you are listening fairly close to the broadcast date, which I'm recording this on June 15th, and I will be releasing it probably on June 18th or 19th to the public. So if you're listening anywhere around that in 2024, this may be relevant to you. We've gone through a lot kind of as a global community energetically in the last few weeks. And there's been a little bit of chaos. There's been a lot of people around me and people I like know and don't know, you know, like that are just in my sphere of awareness who are going through things that are very confronting right now. A lot of us have real world things happening in our very practical day to day that are showing up for us, that are confronting like years old trauma or years old situations, or bringing us to the resolution of a years old situation that perhaps now we're realizing like, oh, I wish I'd already tackled this, but now is the time, right? The first best time to tackle something that you know you need to for your personal growth is the first time it came up. And the second best time is right now. And that energy has been very much with us for the last few weeks. So everyone you know is going through it. Take it with a grain of salt. Everyone's got a lot on their minds right now. Let's pull a card. And my intent with this card is always to give us some loving advice to help us harness the energy of where we're at right now for our own highest good. The card here is the Son of Cups. This particular Son of Cups in this particular deck has been stalking me, and now he stalks you as well. The Son of Cups is analogous to the Knight of Cups in a more traditional Smith-Waite deck. And you can see if you're looking at this, if you're not, if you're just hearing it, I will describe it to you. The Son of Cups shows a silhouette of a figure drinking water from a wine glass, like a goblet of clear, like beautiful, pure water. And within the silhouette, we see that there is this depth, this deep oceanic cavern where we see rock and we also see water, and it is calm and misty within. And it's very much this energy of replenishing our own inner well. We have an inner emotional landscape, and everything that we do at this time needs to start from the inside and work its way out. That means we must nourish our inner landscape, our inner emotional landscape, especially because cups are about emotions. They're about creativity. They're about flow. That means that counter to what you think might be the most direct approach, it is the most direct approach right now for us to nurture our inner emotional world. Because when our inner emotional world is calm and at peace, as we see in the Son of Cups on this tarot deck, how this is like a beautiful, calm, peaceful body of water here, literally. When our inner world is calm and at peace in that way, then everything falls out in alignment. Outside to in, as above, so below, as below, so above. As we seek and honor and nourish our own peace, whatever that looks like for us, we become able to make decisions, and decisions that were previously felt very fraught and previously felt very overwhelming and like conflicty, and like there were so many different factors to consider. As we nourish our own inner well, we gain the equanimity to deal with the situation, and those decisions that previously felt overwhelming now feel incredibly simple. It's just very clear to us what the right course of action is. So that's the energy of the Son of Cups. The Son of Cups is bringing this inside out, almost tentative energy, because the Son of Cups is tentative. Like on the traditional Smith-Waite imagery of the Knight of Cups, he's one of the only knights that is not moving forward. He's pausing. He's pausing to consider how he feels before he pushes through. And that's the energy we want to bring. That's the energy we want to bring everywhere right now. So, with that being said, let's dive in to tarot-led shadow work. I have been talking nonstop about shadow work over the last few weeks because I ran a shadow work workshop in May, which was incredibly rewarding. Everyone who was a part of that, I can't thank you enough, because the collective group energy was so good. This is the thing I'm falling in love with as I do things like group courses, which is new to me in the last like 7-8 months. This is a new part of my career. It kind of accidentally came, and it actually came out of a Son of Cups moment. It came out of me bravely choosing to nourish my inner landscape and finding that things came out of that landscape, things came out of me with ease that I wasn't expecting, that allowed me to directly address the very specific and very harrowing situations right in front of me. And one of those things was being a course creator. And about 8 months ago, 7 or 8 months ago, I launched a course called the Witchy Self-Care Intensive, which, by the way, for those who either were a part of it or would like to be a part of it, I will be running it again at the end of the year. It felt like a really delicious way to end the year, to focus on going inward and our self-care and deep community support at a time when it was during the holidays. People tend to self-abandon. So just a spoiler alert, that course will be coming back at the same time this coming year. But it changed my own life so much to be able to do this work that is like the crux of my mission on earth, because I'm somebody who is, like many of the people I think I'm meant to connect with, like kind of a wounded healer. I'm somebody who works with my own experiences and makes visible my own vulnerabilities, because I believe in so doing that we all can heal together, and we are hurt in relationship and we can heal in relationship as well. And being able to do that in this setting of these like very intimate virtual, like I say courses because that's I think a thing that people can understand, but I really look at them more like experiences. Not that you're not learning, more that it's bigger than just learning things, right? It's not about getting a grade or, you know, a certificate. It's about having an experience that levels you up and helps you heal and grow. That's been incredibly fulfilling for me. And I'm moving into a shadow work course for the first time. I didn't know I would be teaching it. My students taught me that I'd be teaching it. I was informed I would be teaching it. And I'm like, okay, cool. But let me tell you about shadow work. I have been interested and curious about the concept of the shadow since I think my teenage years, and was introduced to it by a fiction writer, Charles DeLint, who is a Canadian urban fantasy writer and really blends mythology from many different cultures with modern day life. And that as a genre is very appealing and exciting to me. And a lot of the ideas that came up in his books have proven to be very meaningful for me in life. Like these are like spiritual concepts and archetypal concepts that I think really add meaning to life. And shadow work is one of those things. I learned about the shadow from Charles DeLint's books, from fiction books. But the shadow is a Jungian concept, and the shadow is the parts of our personality that, as we move forward, we put away. And I say it that way because that feels like the most simple way to describe it. We put it away. And some examples that I give are when we're young and we are trying to get our own needs met, and we're really at the mercy of our caregivers. And we learn intuitively because children are sponges. They learn without verbalizing, because remember, the first 1 to 3 years of our life, we are learning, soaking up a ton of information and don't have language yet. So we're learning at a subverbal level. Or I wouldn't, like, a nonverbal level, I would say, like, because subverbal, like, puts a judgment on it, right? We have this incredible capacity for learning that predates our ability for speech. Speech is one of the things that we pick up along the way. And with the astonishing level of intuition that children have, when we see that something works or doesn't work with our caregivers, we adapt our personality to that pretty quickly, because our caregivers are our caregivers. They are our source of care. Humans are very squishy when they are born and for a number of years thereafter, and cannot survive in the wild alone. And so it's very developmentally and evolutionarily important that we have caregivers who love us and protect us. And when we learn that there are things that don't fly with our caregivers, those things often move into shadow. We're like, oh, this part of my personality is not gonna work because my caregiver doesn't like it and I depend on this person. So, okay, it's in shadow, I put it away, right? Doesn't mean the impulse wasn't ever there. Doesn't mean that's not a part of our personality. It means we put it away. And throughout our lives, this can happen. Throughout our lives, we go through different experiences and we highlight or put away different parts of ourselves. As we identify, as we continually answer the question on a pretty subconscious level, who do I need to be to face this? Who do I need to be to get my needs met, right? And anything that is not part of who do I need to be to get my needs met moves into shadow. Because the second question is, who do I not need to be, right? Who do I not need to be to get my needs met? Those parts of ourselves move into shadow as we intuitively, which humans are incredibly good at, as we kind of intuitively understand, okay, this is going to fly, this is not going to fly. So that's the shadow. It's the part of ourselves, the parts of ourselves that we put away. Much like our regular personality, there's so much there. It's so complex. It's so multi-layered, right? We are a study in contradictions. We are Meredith Brooks. We're a bitch. We're a lover. We're a child. We're a mother, right? And there are pieces of our shadow that may be very similar to pieces of our conscious self, right? And there are also pieces that may feel completely counterintuitive. And what's important for you to know, it gets deeper and more complicated. What's important for you to know as well is that most of our day-to-day choices, you've heard me say this again and again on the podcast, I should start a drinking game at this point, but most of the choices we make day-to-day in life are not made consciously. They're made on a subconscious level. And mostly this is like a programming feature because, everything we do is a choice, right? Every moment of our lives, there are 100 different things we could do. But if we can narrow it down to, am I about to get out of bed and make myself a cup of coffee and go to work today? That's kind of like a foregone conclusion, then we're a little less overwhelmed by making, the thousands of choices we actually make to accomplish that. So our subconscious makes a lot of choices for us, and it makes a lot of choices based on our subconscious's interpretation of what has and hasn't worked in the past. And guess where our shadow is? It's in our subconscious. So there are areas of life and moments in our lives when our shadow comes right out. So often when I say shadow work, people are confused because they're like, this is imperceptible to me. And it's like, well, no. And I'll say a common joke that it's not a joke, it's real. But a common thing that I say, kind of to be funny, is I'm a New Yorker and I don't have much of a New York accent. I've been told by New Yorkers that I don't sound like I'm from New York, and I've been told by people elsewhere that I don't really sound like I'm from New York until I'm mad. And then I get mad and then the New York comes out. and or, you know, like I'm in traffic, which might mean that I'm mad. You know, like certain big emotions can trigger the New York accent under the hood. And our shadow is the same way. Our subconscious, those parts of ourselves get activated and considered and reconsidered during times of stress, times of trauma, times that remind us of traumatic things from the past, right? So, and sometimes it's not even, it's like triggers, right? Aren't, some of them seem very mundane. That's the nature of triggers. That's why we have things like content warnings on posts. It's so that a person who has a trigger can know, hey, you're about to enter into this situation. You can decide whether to opt in or opt out, or mentally prepare yourself for it, right? Our triggers can appear very mundane. Someone saying something to us in the wrong tone of voice that just reminds us of, I don't know, a parent yelling at us as they angrily made breakfast or something like that when we were quite small and we were quite frightened. And it might even just be like a couple of words strung together in a similar tone of voice, and we might not even be consciously aware that that's what the brain connection is doing. You know what I mean? We get these, we get triggered, and different parts of our personality kind of light up, rather than what we consider to be our conscious rational mind, which is driving the bus on very few decisions. Our conscious mind does not drive the bus on a lot of decisions, but when we are aware we have a decision to make, our consciousness comes into it. However, also secondarily true is that it's been shown again and again in studies that although humans believe themselves to be very rational creatures, and we do have the ability to reason, right? We have higher reasoning as a core programming feature. Humans do. Though we have this ability, we primarily make decisions based on factors other than reason, which isn't to say reason doesn't enter into it, but primarily we are very emotional decision makers as human beings. And I guarantee you that there are human beings listening to this going like, oh yeah, all those other people, so emotional, not me. And I want to tell you that if that's your reaction, you're probably even more of an emotional decision maker because you're not aware of it. Whereas if you're aware that your emotions are coming into play, you can kind of like make a judgment call about like, okay, where am I going to stand? What's my lens for this decision, right? Especially I see this in men. I see this in, I should say, people raised male, because part of what patriarchy does in our culture is teaches men and boys in particular that they must be confident and they must move quickly. They must take decisive action, right? Like these are values that are really prized in men, and that it's considered weak. It's considered a sign of weakness to be uncertain. It's considered a sign of weakness to consider something overly long. And so what that means is that male decision making is actually primed to be more subconscious and more emotionally driven because there is a real cultural imperative to make a quick decision. We didn't know we were getting into feminist theory, but here we are. There is a cultural imperative on a man to make a quick decision, lest he be considered less of a man for being less decisive. And again, these cultural imperatives we're soaking up even before we are verbal. We're soaking up very, very young. There is not as much of a cultural imperative like this for women. Because women are considered to be the more kind of intuitive, the more in touch with their feelings. There's like a few studies that go around comparing how many words per day women speak versus men. Like women are considered to be more talkative, and it's actually it's false. The truth is that women and men kind of on average speak about the same number of words per day, but there are a number of like kind of like online sources and stuff floating around that make the claim that the opposite is true, that make the claim that women talk a whole lot more than men, you know, and it plays into these kind of gender stereotypes. Why these gender stereotypes is important is because we learn them from watching people and watching how their behavior differs if we're, you know, raised as one gender to those of the other gender. And I speak this as a non-binary person, right? We can all have our own gender self-concept that evolves. And also we've all had a lot of gender stuff put on us, right? From the time that we're young. And so it's like, it's complicated to navigate, as anyone in the queer community can tell you, right? If you're in the queer community, like guaranteed you did some shadow work to get there because you had to. So we have, when we talk about male decision making, and this is not me singling out or demonizing men or making a judgment call about right or wrong, but it is me saying that culturally there is pressure on men to make quick decisions, to be decisive, to know what they want, and to move forward, to like be a man of action, like move forward with haste. So there's pressure to make this quick decision. It's probably partly conscious and partly subconscious. And on top of that, we already know that as human beings, we make most of our decisions, especially the ones which we're not fully aware of, with our subconscious and with our emotions, making men even more prone to that because it's like, hurry up the decision process, right? And further, men have this pressure to not look too deeply at their emotional landscape because emotionality is considered to be feminine, and feminine is considered to be a dangerous thing to be if you're a man, right? Like men get beat up for being a sissy. Men get beat up for being perceived to be feminine. So we have at once this whole half of the species that has been told it's very important that you make your decisions quite quickly and with strength behind them, and are probably making emotional decisions because the whole species makes emotional decisions. And also this same half of the species has been told, don't look at your emotions, that's girly, right? So we have, therefore, a bunch of people who have literally been trained, again from the time they were pre-verbal and at subconscious levels, to make very fast decisions and to not look very hard at their emotions, and they're making emotional decisions, right? So it's like there's a level of self-awareness that is like stolen from half of society, is what I would say. You know what I mean? Like, this is one of the ways that patriarchy hurts men, is that you're encouraged not to look deeply and you're encouraged to be a little bit impulsive. And therefore, like, that doesn't always lead to the best decision making, as I'm sure you know, right? Which isn't to say, of course, that men can't look deeply at their emotions, that men can't make thoughtful, rational decisions, right? Of course, we all have the option, we all have the feature set of being able to reason as human beings, of being able to look deeply at ourselves. However, we have this situation, and it, like, our kind of like cultural landscape around patriarchy and misogyny is just one of many, many things that go into this, where men's decision making is a little bit fraught, because as humans, we make emotional decisions and we make decisions with our subconscious. As men, they've been taught not to look within. They've been taught that's girly and dangerous. And also they've been taught to make decisions very fast. So that's actually where their emotions are, like, it's just like all kind of compounds itself. You know what I mean? And I didn't mean to get into this kind of like feminist tangent. I don't mean to make some kind of implication about like gender politics with this, other than that it's interesting to me. And it's been interesting in my conversations with both men and women how these themes come up again and again and again. So let's talk about the shadow, right? We just talked about how men are encouraged to put a lot of their emotions into shadow. I really see, and you see this, like, take a look at media, especially like pretty mainstream media like TV and movies, you know, that kind of everyone has seen. And you'll see that the way that male characters, when they're expressing a strong emotion, most often express it is anger. That's considered like a more culturally sanctioned way. Like a guy punching a wall might mean that he's angry. It might mean that he's heartbroken that his wife left him. It might mean that he's devastated by the situation and feels completely hopeless, right? A number of emotions are expressed by a guy punching a wall, because that is a safe outlet. And by safe, I mean like culturally sanctioned outlet for male emotion under kind of like the toxic masculinity patriarchy thing. And again, Men can rise above this. People of all genders can rise above this. I'm just kind of like sharing about some of the cultural training that we all get when we're younger without much choice in the matter. And when you watch these same mainstream things, you will see women express a wide range of emotions with a wide range of actions because emotionality is considered a part of the female gender role. And so it's not like demonized for women in the same way. And so I'm not here to say like, oh, well, men have this kind of a shadow and women have this kind of a shadow. I'm just kind of like using these broad topics to talk about like, what is the shadow? It's about all of this cultural programming as well as our very, very personal experiences and what we learned to keep out and visible in our personality and what we learned to put away. That's the shadow, plain and simple. So now that I've spent way too long defining my terms, let's talk about what shadow work is. What shadow work is looking at these parts of ourselves, looking at the parts of ourselves that we've hidden from our very selves, right? We've almost walled them off in some cases. Some of the shadow is just stuff that we're like, yeah, this isn't very helpful, or someone finds this annoying, or whatever, you know, or this just isn't going to get the job done, so whatever, I need to put it aside for now. And some of the shadow is like stuff that's like very, you know, like, comes from very traumatic stuff, you know. Some of it's like, wow, I oh my God, like I'm feeling this rage and I've never felt anger in the last 20 years because I just realized I was repressing it, for example. That's an example that happened to me doing shadow work. I grew up, how do I want to put this? In my adult years, in my 20s, and like, I don't know, 18 to all the way maybe into my late 20s, really not having much of a relationship at all with anger. I truly believed that anger was not an emotion that I felt very often or understood very well, because I was repressing a great deal of anger, because that's something I learned how to put into shadow. I learned to put anger into shadow for like my own whatever reasons. We don't have to get into my deep shit, you know what I mean? But I learned to repress my anger, and I did it so effectively that I earnestly believed that anger was not it was simply not an emotion that was very present in my vocabulary. The only kind of anger I really felt was kind of like righteous political social justice anger, you know, like anger at financial inequity, anger at racism, anger at misogyny, right? But like anger on a personal level or an interpersonal level kind of wasn't a part of my lexicon. And I genuinely walked around feeling like I don't really get angry. I don't know how to get angry. I don't even know that I could. It was so far in my shadow. It was as though I had walled it off. And my friends, I super got angry. It was just in shadow and it was not visible to me. So when does our shadow come out? Well, my rage came out when I was feeling very extreme emotions, when I was feeling terrified, or when I was feeling very, very hurt, you know? And that meant that my personality, if you know, like a conversation with me, you know, like probed at a wound in a way that was surprising and sudden enough, could be very volatile very quickly. And it was hard for me to even know that, you know what I mean? Like such was the level of how much this part of me was in shadow. And so I went through a lot of years where I kind of befriended my anger and learned how to be in relationship with it, learned how to manage it, because I hadn't had to, the way many people do when they're young, and kind of like, oh, you know, you don't want to be hot-headed, you have to learn how to manage your anger. It just wasn't a part of my cultural lexicon. So I like learned that after a lot of other people. That's part of what shadow work is. It's finding the things that we didn't get to learn along the way because this part of ourselves was kind of put away. So when I talk about tarot-led shadow work, this is what I'm teaching in Shadow Work Summer School, and it's partly because I'm a tarot reader and it's what comes naturally to me, and it's partly because I just did the Shadow Work workshop for 3 days that was tarot-led, and I was personally like astonished at how powerful it was for me and for others, and I was like half doing it myself. I was leading it, right? Which means I was giving the meditations. I was not receiving the meditations and doing the visualizations. I was just kind of like leading it, and even so, what came up for me for review and the kind of processing that I was able to do was like so much in such a short period of time that it really gave me pause. And I was like, oh, wow, I kind of settled on tarot-led shadow work because I'm a tarot reader and it kind of felt right. And it felt like something I could do that wasn't already being done in a lot of different ways, kind of in the mental health space or whatever. And it turns out that it's very powerful, in my opinion. So you don't need to be a tarot reader to do this, because it's really about, when it comes down to it, it's about symbolism, and it's about what and how that interacts with our unconscious and our subconscious, which I kind of will use interchangeably. And the method that I'm going to share with you for tarot-led shadow work, you can do with a deck of tarot cards, whether or not you know how to read them. You can also do this work with other symbolic languages. You can look at your dreams through this lens. A lot of very good shadow work can come out of dream interpretation, and also a great deal of our dreams are us working through our shit. You know, a great deal of the dreams that make us feel big things usually are about us working through our shit. And if you're willing to look at them, there's some real shadow work that can be done there. You could do this with other symbolic languages. I recommend the tarot because it works for me, because it feels like a very complete symbolic vocabulary. We have 78 cards. We also have now a wealth of different artists' interpretations of those 78 cards. We have reversed meanings. We have upright meanings. We have so much. And you could do this with something like an oracle deck. And what I would suggest is having a thought about what the right oracle deck is to do it with, because in some, not all, oracle card decks, there is a level of spiritual bypassing. There is a level of like, we're so nicey nice that we never talk about the real thing. And I don't mean to trash oracle decks. There are some absolutely amazing oracle decks sitting on my bookshelf that I work with. And also, like, I think about some of the cards that really frighten people in the tarot, that really bring a strong reaction for pretty much anyone, whether you read the tarot or not. I think about death. I think about the 10 of Swords. And I think about the 3 of Swords, all of which are real stressful cards. You look at them right away and there's a visceral reaction. And depending on the intention and the nature of the oracle deck, and, you know, every deck creator has their intention, and it doesn't have to be to do shadow work with the deck, right? Depending on the nature of the deck, there might not be a death, a 10 of Swords, a 3 of Swords. There might not be those cards that are pretty much we universally perceive as like, oh shit cards, right? They might have deliberately created a deck in which there are no oh shit cards, and the closest thing might be like release, change, new beginnings. And I'm here to tell you, our shadow responds to our emotionality, and it responds to, like, it was created for us to deal with difficult circumstances. And so if we kind of like water down the difficulty so much that we're like, this isn't death, it's change and a new beginning. And yes, change and new beginning do come hand in hand with death. That's a balanced view. I understand. And I know that also it's like a party line amongst tarot readers to be like, don't worry, death is just change, because we're managing the emotion of the person we're reading for. We don't want to terrify them. That's not helpful, right? But the truth is, we're going to get to our shadow more effectively if we address things very directly rather than indirectly, right? We're going to get to our shadow more effectively if we address our fears that come up when we look at death, or the 10 of Swords, or the 3 of Swords, or the Tower. Then if we look at a card with, like, I don't know, a phoenix rising from the ashes, and it says rebirth, right? Rebirth is awesome. And some great shadow work can also come out of positive stuff and how it makes us feel not positive. Has anyone had that experience? Often I have that with people as a tarot reader. When the 6 of Wands comes up, which is a card of visibility and accolades and celebrations, right? Of like, literally, this card comes up when you are being celebrated for your contributions, for what you've created, for the mark you've left on the world. And often, when I read for people and that card comes up, there's actually a lot of mixed feelings. There's like imposter syndrome comes up. There's like, I don't deserve it, or I'm not being seen as the real me, or I'm not being seen, like if they only knew, you know what I mean? And there's some shadow work there too, right? Good positive stuff will also lead us to shadow work. I choose the tarot because it's a very complete kind of symbolic language. So that's what I'm going to share with you today. So you can do this with any tarot deck. You can do it with a tarot deck on your phone if you want. Galaxy Tarot is a great app that is free, at least for Android users. I'm not sure if it's out on the iPhone. The Fool's Dog Tarot also has a great selection of apps. They have a bunch of digitized decks. They also have a free sampler app, which is really cool because your card of the day, it'll show you the same card in like 6 or 7 different decks. So you can look at the same card and the imagery on each of the decks. It's really cool. So you don't even need a physical tarot deck. You don't even need to spend any money to do tarot-led shadow work, and you don't need to be able to read the tarot. Because the method I'm going to teach you is about choosing a card, and you can mindfully choose a card that stresses you out. Because that will lead you definitely that will lead you to shadow work. Or you can shuffle and choose a card, like, and allow, kind of the card to be chosen, through your shuffling and your dealing. That's up to you. Our intention is to sit down and do some shadow work. And why we do shadow work because we uncover hidden strengths. We do shadow work because the things that seemed really important to us in the moment when we're frightened, like this part of me gets put away, it's just not safe, are not necessarily what we would actually choose. And our wisdom now as like grown-ass adults who have like seen different things and made, and have different values, and been able to establish values, right? Because we're no longer living in survival mode, hopefully. So we may find that we wish to do some review, and that parts of ourselves we may wish to now heal. We may wish to embrace. We may wish to show up for our inner child. We do shadow work to heal. We also do shadow work because if we're blocked at all, if we experience self-sabotage, if we experience imposter syndrome, if we experience decision-making where we're not sure in retrospect why the hell we made that decision, but we did and we keep making it and we don't want to anymore. If we experience these types of behaviors that feel kind of self-sabotagey, then doing shadow work feels very indirect, but is actually a very direct way of addressing that because it gets to the root of it. Like, what's making those decisions? Not our rational conscious mind, since our rational conscious mind later reviews it and is like, oh shit, why did I do that? Right? So obviously that part of us was not consulted in the decision making. So there's a good chance it came out of our subconscious, our emotionality, our shadow, right? So doing shadow work and uncovering this allows, at the very minimum, our decision making to be a more conscious process because we begin to review it. And also allows us to be like, okay, you know what? I see this part of me kind of gets activated when I'm stressed out. And this part of me is prone to whatever it might be, flying under the radar for safety. So that's why I'm afraid to be visible. Or this part of me is prone to being very dramatic and impulsive because I think it shows weakness to not make a strong statement right away, even if I'm not sure how I feel yet. I just have to say something, right? These different shadow elements, as we become aware of them in ourselves, as we become aware of these kind of tendencies that we've developed over time, we have the opportunity to make choices about them. And we have the opportunity to make choices around them. And we have the opportunity to simply bring them onto the conversation when there's a new decision to be made. And we're thinking, you know how I always do that? It's because of this shit. So I'm just going to hold that in mind while I make the decision rather than making a knee-jerk decision. It just allows us to make decisions better. And the other thing I found for me is that things that seem like legit miracles happen when I do shadow work. And it's not actual miracles, in my opinion. And you can agree or disagree with that. I'm not here to, how I feel about belief is I like to use belief as a tool, and I'm fairly agnostic about it. But for me, when I have done shadow work, when I've done the work to look at the stuff under the hood of my psychology, what happens is I find myself making decisions that I never would have made even 10 days ago, even the week before. And I astonish myself by doing something I've never been able to do before, like set a very strong boundary or ask a very direct question that I would have been terrified to ask, and I astonish myself by it being not a big deal. And I also find that because I have opened my mind to greater possibilities than I believed were previously present, both about who I am and how the world will respond to it, that I see opportunities that I literally could not see before. Just as my anger was hidden behind a brick wall for so many years, when my anger came out, I was able to realize, oh, if someone says something shitty to me, I don't have to just be nice and try to make them comfortable, because that's actually like the kind of like fawn response I would have in the past. If someone says something shitty to me, I'm allowed to tell them that was a shitty thing to say to me, like possibilities I would never have thought of. I literally didn't know I could do that. And in like other contexts and just emotional, in professional context, realizing, oh, I could have help with this. I could just call someone to do this for me. I don't have to do it myself. I don't have to figure it out. Oh, this isn't hard anymore because I'm no longer afraid of being visible. So like what feels like miracles happen, but what it actually is that our mind is expanding and we see possibilities, and our mind is actually great at problem solving. Our minds are actually really good at like getting the lay of the land, seeing all the possibilities and being like, oh, that's the solution, right? Because that's what kept us alive when we were a much younger species and we were like being chased by a mammoth and had to hide behind the correct rock in order to survive. So when we see and understand more possibilities, it's like solutions appear to us that seem like magic. And I don't know that it is magic. I think it's just the human mind. But anyway, so TLDR, do shadow work because it'll make you feel like a walking friggin' miracle and it'll heal you. And yeah, it's hard and it's also really worth it. So how do we do tarot-led shadow work? Moving into this portion of like the direct hands-on thing where I'm not just discussing it. We do tarot-led shadow work by selecting a tarot card, and I'm just going to select one. But I'm going to first tell us the elements of how we will go about this. We are going to choose to work on a piece of our shadow. We may have an idea of something we want to work on. We might have an idea of like, okay, this thing keeps tripping me up. I keep doing the same self-sabotage pattern, or I can't break away from this particular set of shitty thoughts about myself. Or like we might have some idea of why we're doing the shadow work. Or we might just be like, I don't know, I just got to do some healing, bro. So we start with, we have a choice. We have a choice to mindfully choose a card. We can choose a card that feels emblematic to us of what we're going through, right? If we're like, oh man, I'm really struggling right now to believe in myself, and it means that I'm not taking actions I know I should take. We might choose a card that represents that to us. Or we might choose a card that represents the fear to us, you know? If we're just leafing through the deck and we know that we've got some work to do and a card jumps out at us as being super friggin' stressful, we might choose that card, right? We might be like, well, this card's stressing me out. I bet there's some good stuff in here. I bet it has something to teach me, right? We can kind of do this, you know, very on purpose, or we can shuffle the deck and then, you know, choose a card with the cards face down like this and just like kind of allow our intuition or whatever to pick a card for us and be like, here, this is the card I'm working with. And what we're going to do with this card is actually go inside of it. We're going to travel within this card, which may or may not upset us. Now, what you can do, if you're a reader, you might already know the meaning of the card. That may be something of a liability for shadow work because we consciously know the meaning of the card, but we're working on connecting with our subconscious. So it may be helpful for you to look up the meaning of the card, whether you're a reader already or whether you have never read tarot cards in your life, to look it up in like the little white book or online. What does this card mean? And just kind of look at some of those phrases and pay particular attention to ones that jump out at you and feel like there's some friction there. Feel like it's like, I have feelings about that. We're paying attention to that. We're going to move into this tarot card, and that's going to be a meditation. But first, we're going to give ourselves some tools because shadow work can be scary. And shadow work can touch on trauma. So importantly, we shouldn't do something that might dramatically trigger our trauma, right? That might impact our mental health. This is the disclaimer portion of the podcast. If your mental health is at a place where you know the wrong thing might set you down a very dark road and it doesn't feel safe, it's not the right time to do shadow work, especially not on your own. It's the right time to seek like a licensed professional to help you move through that. I would say it's the right time, like, immediately to do that, because if your mental health is in that kind of a place, anything could trigger it, right? Like, it doesn't have to be shadow work. Like, someone on the street saying the wrong thing to you might trigger it, you know? And it's worthwhile and important for you to take care of your mental health in that way, and to seek counsel who is trained to help you do that and help you do that healing in a safe way. So I don't recommend shadow work if you are in a dire mental health place, or if you know that the wrong thing could put you in a dire mental health place. That's yours to take charge of, you know? But if you're worried about it sending you spiraling, then don't do shadow work right now. Like, we don't have to re-traumatize ourselves to prove we're cool and spiritual, you know? Like, then do what you need to do. Or if you feel like shadow work is actually what's going to help you get through it, then I'm going to implore you to do it also with support, right? Also with friends and loved ones that you can really trust, who know you and understand you, for them to know, like, hey, I'm doing this work and it might mess me up and I might need a buddy. You know what I mean? And or, like I said, like a trained mental health professional to be like, hey, I'm kind of going on this journey right now. I'm doing a shadow work thing. I might need to text you. I might need an extra therapy appointment. Like, and they can also, you know, give you some advice about how to protect your mental health, you know? So, that's kind of my grain of salt. We're not trying to re-traumatize ourselves, and we should also have, this is for everybody now, we should always have an opt-out, right? If we get to a point where we're like, oh, I thought that this was just gonna, like, you know, give me some feelings, give me some insights, give me something to journal about, and actually I feel like I'm spiraling and I'm really frightened of where my mental state is headed right now, we get to opt out at literally any time, and we should have a safety net for ourselves in place. And that safety net can look like a friend to call, it can look like a mental health professional to call, it can look like activities that we know will help us step back from the edge, right? If we have like comfort movies and comfort foods, and we're like, when I have a terrible day and I feel like I'm gonna, you know, like all the things, like the world is caving in on me, this is what I do. I go and I put on my pajamas and I get in a sleeping bag and I get some chocolate and I watch The Princess Bride, whatever it is, right? We should have those activities lined up for ourselves on purpose, because we don't do shadow work to make ourselves miserable. We don't do shadow work to trigger ourselves. We don't do shadow work to send ourselves in a spiral. We do it to help. So we're going to have these helper activities to bring us back no matter what, whether it's because we need to bail at some point, or it's because we go through and do the work and then we need a regrounding, a rebalancing and comfort. Because you've heard this a million times from me before too. People like to say growth starts outside your comfort zone. And I'm here to say, no, growth, it's true that in order to grow, we do need to push on the edges of our comfort zone. Like, growth can be uncomfortable. But if we try to live outside of our comfort zone, that is a recipe for constantly traumatizing ourselves. That's a recipe for us feeling constantly unsafe, and generally does not lead to growth. It leads to more pulling in. It leads to putting more things in shadow, because we're so triggered all the time that we just like can deal with less and less. That's not growth. That's trauma. We don't put ourselves through trauma. That's not how we do self-care. So, you know, kind of, that's my disclaimer. We want to have at the ready some care for ourselves after the shadow work, or during the shadow work, or if we need to bail on the shadow work. We also want to create, because we're visualizing, right? We've pulled a card and we're going to go into the card and we're going to have an experience with our feelings and whatever's on the card or whoever's on the card, right? This is great for tarot cards that have like figures on them that we can talk to. But it's probable, if there's a landscape, here's a tarot card that I'm showing on the YouTube channel, of the Ten of Pentacles in this Way Home tarot deck. Like this, there's no one here, but this is like a set dinner table with like a beautiful, like, we have these beautiful like beads of light and beautiful floral arrangements and all this stuff. And there's no one here, but you could very much imagine entering into this type of landscape and someone might show up, right? And or you could experience your feelings being in this setting. So that's what we're going to do. And we want to bring an additional safety net, because we're already using our imagination, of a loving guide, our higher self. Or if our relationship with ourself is challenged enough at this time that it's hard for us to envision our higher self or our best self, then we're just going to envision whatever loving guide feels right, whether it's just like kind of a generic guide that has our back, that is like a loving source of support and sanctuary, whether it is, you know, an ancestor or, you know, the embodiment of a loved one who always looked after us, or whether it is like a fictional thing that we create of someone that we feel very safe with. We're going to create a guide to go there with us, because we don't have to make ourselves miserable. We can have help. We don't have to do everything by ourselves. Things I learned through shadow work. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to initiate for ourselves a visualization. And when I say the word visualization, many people get stressed because not everybody has what people term a mind's eye. Not everyone can close their eyes and like see a scene, right, in their mind. Aphantasia, I think that's called. And also as I've kind of like sniffed around that a little more, I have a mind's eye and I have a pretty active imagination, and I always have. But as I've learned a little more about that, I also learned that there's a piece of this where like more adults and children have aphantasia, and there's a possibility too that like using that muscle can get it back, you know. And you know, like I think probably like everything, there's a spectrum of ability here. And I'm here to tell you that you don't have to have like some crystal clear picture of something in your mind. You don't have to like close your eyes and like see a scene. If that's not something you feel you can do, you can still do this. And that's why I tend to reduce the words to use your imagination, because that means different things for different people, right? Using our imagination might mean telling ourselves a story with words. It might mean imagining a conversation that we're having with our guide, for example, right? And I know we can all imagine a conversation, because we've all had the "here's what I should have said" conversation with ourselves, like while we're driving away angry after a fight, right? What I should have said was this, right? So we can imagine. We have an imagination, we can use it. So use your imagination in whatever way is most accessible to you, and don't stress about it being right or wrong. You know, if you're looking at the tarot card and you're like, here's the scene, we can use our imagination to enter that scene. And it doesn't have to mean we're like visualizing doing it, you know, like it's an online role-playing game or something like that. We can just use our imagination. We can tell ourselves a story. We can do whatever gives us the feeling of, okay, I'm entertaining this idea. I'm allowing my disbelief to be put to the side for right now, and I'm using my imagination to imagine that I'm in this tarot card, whatever that means to you. And we're going to imagine that we're there not alone, but with our guide. And that our guide is kind of all-knowing about us and really cares about us and knows all the things that make us feel comfortable, right? If we're the person who needs someone to like physically hold our hand, or if we're the person who like needs someone to really explain to us while we're going through something, our guide will know that and do that. And our guide will share with us like, you're here to learn something. We're going to take you back to a memory, or we're going to take you to a part of yourself that has to do with how you feel about this tarot card. And there may be a figure that emerges that we speak to on the tarot card who has things to say to us, or there may be a younger or different version of ourself who emerges, who has things to share with us. We're going to leave this fairly open-ended, but the intention is we're going into this tarot card, we're using our imagination to go into a tarot card with a loving guide and have an experience that's going to shed some light on our shadow. And when I did this with the shadow work workshop that I just did, it was profound to me how many very different experiences people had from what seemed to be the same parameters. I would choose 3 cards, and one of them would be the card that we went into, and people would have a variety of different experiences and a variety of different realizations about themselves. And that's what kind of set me to feel like tarot-led shadow work, like there's something here. It can really help us. And it can give us each what we need in the moment rather than a kind of generic experience. So we're going to enter into the card, and we're going to allow our guide to be someone we consult at any moment. We could be like, hey guide, nothing's happening here. What should I do? Or if a lot's happening and we're overwhelmed, we could be like, hey, guide, I need some help. I'm feeling overwhelmed. And the guide can kind of allow us to give us that sanctuary to ourselves. So that is, that's what we're doing. We're using our imagination. So what are our best practices when doing something like a guided visualization, a meditation? And I invite you to use this context, by the way, anytime ever that you're doing a guided visualization. If you're like, I can't visualize, I can't do that, I'm going to invite you to replace it with, I'm using my imagination and however I do it is just right. Because in 9 times out of 10, that'll give you a better experience than trying to do a thing you feel like you can't do. So we can set some best practices. We want to have a comfortable physical space for us to be in, not in our mind's eye in real life. Like we want to set up a place where we won't be interrupted, where we know we have a good stretch of time, where people aren't going to come like kind of bombarding us with like the everyday world or needs or, you know, questions or worse, drama, you know, because we want to be able to have our experience. We want to be able to have a little bit of a safety net so we have a choice afterward to like be able to reach out to somebody or to give ourselves a very comforting, you know, rest of our day after that. We want to be kind of comfortable. We probably want to not fall asleep. So if you're the kind of person who does fall asleep, if you're meditating, consider sitting very straight and having your feet on the ground, or even standing while you do this meditation in a comfortable posture, you know, maybe like you're leaning against a wall or something, but consider doing things that will prevent you from falling asleep. You can even have your eyes open and have a soft focus rather than closing your eyes, which is a big sleep trigger for some people. Now, some of us are very sleep deprived. Many of us are very sleep deprived. So if you find that you're trying to do shadow work and you keep falling asleep, maybe you need sleep right now. Maybe that's what you need. And maybe you have an interesting dream related to the shadow work, or maybe you don't. But, you know, sometimes the biggest thing our self-care needs is just like the basics, is food and sleep and care. So we set ourselves up that environment to do this. And then ideally we are going to capture it in some way. After the experience, we're going to allow our guide to kind of guide us back to consciousness. It may help us if when we're like kind of moving from the physical world to our imagined world to do what's called an induction, where we kind of put ourselves in a different mental state, where we're not like dealing with the day-to-day everyday demands of the world. We're slowing down. We are focusing on our breath. It helps to simply observe our breath as it travels in and out of our lungs. It helps to make our exhalations longer than our inhalations, which activate the parasympathetic nervous system, which allows us to relax more rather than entering into fight, flight, or freeze. It's like the opposite of fight, flight, freeze. We can create circumstances for ourselves and do whatever it takes to kind of get us into a meditative state. Those of us who are regular or even semi-regular meditators probably already have a clue. But if you don't, you know, if you don't know what works for you, it's always a good idea to kind of allow your eyes to close or allow for a soft focus and to focus on your breathing and even do a certain number of breaths, like count down from 10 breaths. And allow yourself the idea that on breath 10 is when I imagine that I'm walking into this tarot card and beginning my experience. And we plan for the same thing as we go out. Our guide will lead us back out when the time is done, when we've had our experience, and then we can kind of bring ourselves up by refocusing on our breath, refocusing on our body, refocusing on the feel of our clothing and air on our skin, and bringing ourselves back up to here I am in the real world again, right? And then we would like to ideally capture this experience. You may wish to journal. If you're not like a physical writer, you can type. If you're not like a wordy person like that, and speaking is more how you know, it's more your natural self, you can use a voice recorder. Capturing the experience is meaningful for 2 reasons. Firstly, because it's like having the experience twice and you get to notice more things. So it's been shown that when we learn something and then teach it to another person, we grasp it ourselves much better. The act of teaching it to someone else makes us understand it better. So when we have the experience and then we journal it back to ourselves or speak it back to ourselves, we're teaching ourselves the experience. We're having that 2-part learning process so that it can really sink in, right? so that maybe some emotional things that we noticed can become more clear to us. Maybe we can have some observation as we go, as we're, kind of scribing this. And then later we even get the opportunity to read or listen back. And that allows us to kind of get all that we can from the experience, instead of it being a one-off cathartic moment that goes right back into our subconscious. It brings it thoroughly into our consciousness. And ideally, we then think about this for a little while. Like, shadow work is meant to be done and then lived with. Plateaus are there for a reason while we're learning. We're like up, 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 and then you hit a plateau, right? I'm sure you've experienced this with something you're learning or with a goal you're working on, where you're like, oh, I'm at this plateau and I want to break it. The plateau's there for us to acclimate. It's there for us to kind of acknowledge the level up and be able to access the different things that we've gained during the course of our growth. The plateau allows us to reacclimate to the new normal. So ideally, that's how shadow work should be. We have this experience, which should be a little emotional and cathartic and probably challenging, and we capture it and we maybe listen back to it, and then we acclimate to it. Like, then we give ourselves a few days just to be ourselves, and we will probably notice thoughts coming up. Like, this is what I hear a lot from people after they've done guided shadow work with me, is like, okay, I had this conversation and I would have ordinarily always responded this way, and I thought about this meditation that we did and I was like, I don't have to respond this way, and I made a different choice. So that's what the acclimation process looks like. Naturally, our minds will be integrating this work that we've done, and we should give ourselves some time to do that, right? And again, this is an iterative process. We can go back again and again and again and do this. And I will share, yeah, I'm teaching a shadow work course, everybody. If you want to do this in a handheld kind of way, which I think is a wonderful way to heal, especially if you have any kind of wounds around relationship, which most people do. We're hurt in relationship, we heal in relationship. So what I'm doing with my shadow work summer school is we're doing the shadow work. That work is going to drop at the beginning of every week. And at the end of every week, we're getting together just to talk about it with each other, just to be supportive of each other, just to show up and heal in relationship, in community, just to do that piece. And I know from experience of past group experiences I've led that alone is incredibly powerful and cathartic. And so we're doing both in Shadow Work Summer School, because I think both together is what gets us the most growth in the most loving way, because that's what I'm concerned with. I'm not concerned with the most growth even at the expense of our mental health. That sucks. I am not concerned with being so gentle with ourselves that we don't grow. That's the other direction of sucking. I want us to get the most growth in a way that feels really loving and gentle, and like it hits for us the way it needs to hit, and we continue to flourish. So if you're interested in it, I will put in the show notes a link where you can find out more about Shadow Work Summer School, and you're also welcome to reach out to me on any social media. You can message me, leave a comment on my most recent post, whatever. You can email me, sassafrastarot@gmail.com. If you are curious about Shadow Work Summer School, I'd love to talk to you about it. If you want to just do this work on your own, awesome. I'm a huge self-study person. In part, originally, that was because I was like both a little non-mainstream in my schooling years, and also because when I was in like K through 12 school, I was like, I don't know, one of the smart kids or whatever, and often I'd be reading ahead, I'd be already doing the homework, or I'd be like, frankly, onto my own thing, because the rest of the class was still kind of learning what they needed to learn. And that wasn't like a negative thing. That was like okay with me. But it's made me kind of an independent person in terms of like, I pursue my growth at my own pace naturally. And if you're that person, like, go for it, like take this and run with it, and feel free to evolve it to suit you. You don't have to do it just the way I suggest it. I do these things because they work very well for me and for the people I work with. And there's like a type of person that is like right to work with me. You know what I mean? And if you're like, okay, this works, this sucks, and it doesn't resonate with me, just change it. Like, I won't be upset. I won't even know. But that's actually what I wish for you to do, is have your most meaningful experience with it on your own terms. So that's tarot-led shadow work. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk. And If you would like to share about your own experiences with this, I would love that. If you're a patron, your bonus content for the $5 and up patrons is going to be a guided meditation just like this. You will still select a tarot card, but I'm going to hold your hand through the whole experience and actively give you a meditation that you can just listen to. And so it's kind of like the 2.0 version where you're not creating this yourself. You're like just allowing yourself to experience it. That's the $5 and up bonus content for this podcast. And like I said, if you want to go all in and have like a very, very deep experience in community with other people who also want to have a deep experience and want to heal together, Shadow Work Summer School, look in the show notes or look on my social media because you will find it. And we're done. Thank you so much for listening to SassafrasCast. Thank you for being a part of my community. If you like this podcast, it would mean a lot to me. It would be meaningful to me if you would rate it and review it wherever you do listen to podcasts. Reviews especially are helpful because they can move the needle for people. If someone is looking to listen to something, sometimes the right review will make them go, oh yes, that's exactly what I'm looking for, or nope, that's not it. And that's helpful, because people make emotional decisions and anecdotal decisions, not necessarily rational ones. And so reviews are meaningful. And if you think that there's someone in your life who might just enjoy what I have to say about this, if you could take a moment and share it with them, that would really mean a lot to me. That's like the highest form of help that you can give to a creator. If you would like to support this podcast financially and unlock exclusive benefits for doing so, you can do that at patreon.com/Sassafras Tarot for $1 a month or more. Patrons get access to things like extra content, personalized tarot pulls, a witchy Discord community, and more. If you have a question, idea, or suggestion, or if you just want to tell me how this hit, because this is a two-way street, I would love to hear it. You can email me anytime at sassafrastarot@gmail.com. And you can follow me on social media at Sassafras Tarot on Facebook, Instagram, Twitch, YouTube, and TikTok. And if you'd like to order a reading from me, you can look on my social media because you'll see I do the Witchy Weather Report now, and I also offer personalized Witchy Weather Reports. That's kind of the big thing I'm sharing at this moment is once a month I do a Witchy Weather Report personalized for anyone who orders one. They're $37 or $27 if you subscribe and save. And it gives you an overview of the month. So you can order that just by contacting me directly. I'll send you the link where you can sign up, or you can look at my Etsy shop, which has a variety of tarot readings you can order. I'm in transition now. There's a lot of places to find me. Search Sassafras Tarot on the internet and you will find what you seek, and you can always reach out to me. As always, I really appreciate you being on this journey with me. I will see you again soon. I don't even know what we'll be talking about next month. That's the way this is. I tend to approach it very intuitively, and I talk about what I feel I need to talk about each month. So stay in touch. I would love to hear from you because you've heard a lot from me in the last hour and change, and have a wonderful